Thank you, Mr. Director. The special counsel report on the investigation into Russian interference in 2016 presidential election concluded, and I quote, "The Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome." The report detailed two primary information warfare operations, one of which was, in their words, a Russian entity that carried out a social media campaign that favored presidential candidate Donald J. Trump and disparaged presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Director Wray, based on your intelligence at the moment, do you conclude that the Russians still have the same goal and intention to support President Trump in next year's election, as the special counsel's report indicated? And I think that requires a yes or no.
I don't know that I think we have the answer to that at the moment. I think what I would say is the special counsel's report speaks for itself in terms of what it found. And we continue to assess that the Russians are focused on sowing divisiveness and discord in this country and pitting us against each other. And that part, I think, we see alive and well.
But you have no further indication of a preference for a candidate at this point?
I don't think there's anything that I could share at this particular point in time.
Would you commit to making public at a point that you have sufficient information and intelligence that there is a preference by the Russians that is guiding their information operations? I think that would be critical to the American public.
Well, certainly we want to make sure that both the Congress and the American public get the information they need to have. Anytime you start raising hypotheticals involving counterintelligence efforts, I want to be really careful about what I commit to, given my commitment to protecting sources and methods, protecting ongoing investigations, and to protecting our relationships with foreign liaison partners.
It's not about source and methods, Mr. President. I think there's been a lot of criticism previously, and many from our Republican colleagues, that President Obama didn't do enough to alert the American public that there was a concerted effort directed at supporting President Trump, as was established very clearly in the Mueller report. Also, when it was, again, the intelligence communities, their report in 2017, in January 2017, quote, "When it appeared to Moscow that Secretary Clinton was likely to win the presidency, the Russian influence campaign focused more on undercutting Secretary Clinton's legitimacy, including by impugning the fairness of the election." In fact, there was an indictment last year, last October, in the Eastern District of Virginia, of a Kremlin-linked troll group, the Internet Research Agency, posing as Americans, deployed messages about voter fraud through social media throughout the United States. Are you looking at the 2020 election, anticipating another attempt to discredit the credibility and the legitimacy of the election?
We are keenly focused on preparing for the 2020 election in terms of the malign foreign influence threat. We expect to see efforts to, as I said, sow divisiveness and discord, and likely efforts to use fake news, propaganda, fake personas, et cetera, which might be done in a way that would be geared towards affecting particular races, but might also be done just to generate chaos. Either way,
but also
we're keenly attuned to it and focused on that.
Undermine the legitimacy of the election. Undermine the legitimacy of the election, which is interesting because President Trump on the campaign trail in 2016 talked about the only way we can lose if this cheating goes on. It's a conscious parallelism, perhaps, or unconscious parallelism, I don't know which, but we are in a position right now where, particularly if their favorite candidate does not prevail, where the Russians will do what they were going to do deliberately in 2016 and suggest that machines have been tampered with, that immigrants have voted illegally. So what respected and legitimate officer of the United States today has been charged with the task, collaborating with the states, because they run these elections, to immediately communicate with the American public on the facts, i.e., there was no machine tampering, there were no illegal immigrants, or, if there are, the specifics of those facts. Without that, we could face a crisis and a constitutional crisis of immense dimensions. Who's going to do that?
Well, the principal interface between the federal government and state and local election officials is the Department of Homeland Security.
And we don't have a director, right?
I'm sorry?
And we don't have a director.
Well, we have an acting
Acting
secretary.
okay.
And I think in terms of putting out information, what I've experienced during my 20 months on the job, when it comes to putting out information about election influence or election interference, is that we, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the Department of Homeland Security, all work together in terms of trying to put out public messaging.
Has the president directed you or anyone else to be prepared to do this? Because given what we've observed already, it's highly unlikely that he would be in a position, particularly if he was on the other end of the election, the wrong end, to be arbitrary, to be objective and factual and trying to calm the American public rather than to aggravate the situation. Have you been directed, or has he directed you to do that?
We have had, the group that I've described a minute ago, meaning FBI, ODNI, NSA, DHS, and others, have had a number of meetings that, some of which included the president himself chairing them, that have been focused on our efforts on how we can up our game to protect our elections and our democracy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy.